All right, as we are now in section 1.5 in geometry, we're going to start off with some review from 1.4. So see if you can't answer this question. It says measure of angle XYZ is 2x and measure of angle PQR equals 8x minus 20 degrees. I know there's no picture, but you don't really need one in this case because it says that if these two angles are supplementary, I want you to find the measure of each angle. So see if you can't answer that question. If you're stuck, go back to 1-4 and see if you can't figure it out. So today we're talking about 1.5. It's all about using formulas in geometry, and today we're going to apply formulas for perimeter, area, and circumference. And yes, some of you guys probably could guess you have learned this before. So you've done this already. It should be pretty easy, but something I've noticed every year is that some students still don't remember how to find the circumference of a circle versus what the area formula is for a circle. And this is something I was talking about earlier is I'm just asking you guys to apply these things. Just apply them. In calculus, you actually get to derive them. Yay! Which is really fun, and I'm excited for you guys to learn how to do that. So today we're just going to be applying them. Let's see, perimeter, area, and circumference. In the breakdown of these notes, the first thing we're going to talk about are parallelograms. So parallelograms, the two most common parallelograms you guys are familiar with are rectangles and squares. So we're going to talk about those first. Then we're going to go ahead and talk about some triangles because they're awesome. And then we're going to conclude with circles. So that's the setup for today's video. Just to talk about perimeter versus area, again, I know you guys have talked about this already before, but perimeter is basically the distance around something. So for those of you guys who went to Palm Desert Charter Middle School or whatever, when I went, on every Friday we had to run around. Here was Palm Desert Middle School. I know it's called something different. And here was Lincoln. And when I was in high school, we had to start up at the park. Here's me. And we had to run around the school and around and around, and then we'd go over towards Lincoln and run around, come around here, and this is where we finished. And we would call that, some of you guys call that the mile. Well, and I don't think they use this route anymore. We called it the perimeter because you were literally taking the perimeter of those two schools. So perimeter is just the distance around something. You just add up all the sides. When we talk about answers, the answers for perimeter is going to be expressed in linear units, such as you just put whatever units it is, inches or meters or miles or whatever it is. Okay, so that's perimeter. Area is all the space inside something. So perimeter is the outside, area is the inside. And the answer for area is going to be expressed in square units. So you always have that little number 2 exponent for your answers. Okay, so that should be all review. Now let's talk about the first thing, rectangles, squares, parallelograms basically. Again, perimeter, you just add up all the sides. This shows it's a rectangle because the two opposite sides are going to be congruent to each other, and there's a right angle. We talk about this more in chapter 6. Squares, hopefully you know that all the sides are going to be congruent to each other. So we just use an S to represent the sides since all the sides are the same. So number 1 is such an easy example. This is like too easy for you guys, so I'm going to make it a little bit harder, okay? I'm going to change it and put it 4x plus, let's do 4x plus 10. Why not? Inches. Okay, so find the perimeter and find the area. Okay, well, we know that these two opposite sides are going to be congruent, so this side's also going to be 4x plus 10 inches, and then both these sides are going to be 6 inches. So to find the perimeter, all you're doing is adding up both sides. So this side plus this side plus this side plus this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine like terms. So we have a 4x and we have a 4x. That's going to be an 8x. Then let's add up all the numbers. So let's see, we have a 10 and a 10, that's 20, and we have a 6 and a 6. So 20 plus 12, that's 32. So your answer is going to be 4x plus 32 inches. That's the perimeter. You cannot solve for this x. This is as simple as it's going to get. For area, you're just going to be multiplying. Here's the formula. Area is just length times width. I like to call it base times height. So get used to using base times height for me, please. Okay, so area, we're just going to multiply these two sides. So we have 6 times that 4x plus 10. And then you distribute. So your answer is going to be 24x plus 10. We know we're talking about inches, so it's going to be inches squared. All right, so you're going to see more questions like this and not that simplified elementary example. See if you can go ahead and do number 2. The area of a square is 49x squared. Find the perimeter. I'll give it x inches. Find the perimeter. Well, some of you guys are like, square, okay, all the sides are the same. So let's say this white thing is going to be our square. Okay, so the area, I know I have to multiply this side by this side, and those sides are going to be the same. So some of you guys maybe, if I said that the area was 49, you could just square root it and say, okay, well, both sides are going to be 7, because 7 times 7 makes 49. But now we have this x squared in it. You're still going to take the square root of x squared, which is really just going to be x. And if you work backwards, what is x times x? And some of you guys are going to say 2x, which is wrong. X times x is x squared. So now that we've square rooted this answer, you have 7x and 7x. So we know all the sides are going to be 7x. To find the perimeter, all you have to do is add it up. So the perimeter should be 28 inches, and 28x inches. Sweet. Okay, so we talked about parallelograms. The next thing we're going to talk about is triangles, my favorite. Perimeter, you just add up all the sides. Again, this thing is not really a side. For when we're talking about triangles, some people get confused. Triangles, we're walking around the outside of the triangle, nothing inside. Okay, so perimeter, add up all the sides, 3 sides. For area, I use 1/2 base times height. This base times height divided by 2 is exactly the same thing. But let's talk about base times height, because remember I said when we were talking about parallelograms, I don't like to use length times width. I like to use base times height. The reason why I like to use base times height is because there's a relationship between the base and the height. They are always perpendicular. This upside down T means perpendicular. And what that means is they meet at 90-degree angles. We're going to use this a lot throughout the year. So this is the easiest type of example I could give you. A right triangle, in which case the right two sides that meet at 90-degree angles are the base and the height. It doesn't matter that the base is always on the bottom. In fact, it's not always going to be on the bottom. So you could turn this around, and I could call this the base and this the height. It doesn't really matter, because when you multiply, you're going to get the same answer. This was a right triangle. We talked about 2 other types of triangles. We talked about acute triangles. This could be an example of an acute triangle. And we talked about obtuse triangles. Obtuse means it has one obtuse angle. So like this one is more than 90, so this is an obtuse. When you talk about acute and obtuse triangles, you're going to have the height is not going to be one of the sides. It's going to be something inside when it's an acute triangle, or something outside when it's an obtuse. This will be the height. This part only will be the base. So for example, let's say I gave you something that looks like this. Let's say here's my obtuse triangle, and I'll say, let's say this side's 10, and this side's 15, and this side's 6. Okay. And then I have to give you this part at this point. I have to give you this part. So let's say this one's 9. Okay, so we're only going to use this number and this number. I don't care about this number. Okay, so we'll talk about that more in class. Remind me, please. Okay, moving on. Find the perimeter in the area. All you guys have to do, you guys can figure this one out. Just add them up. For area, you're going to be multiplying this one and this one. So see if you can go ahead and do that one. Number 3. All right, moving on to circles. Circles, you guys, diameter is, a line that goes through the center and hits the circle twice. A radius is just half. Radius is half of a diameter. And the circumference is basically the perimeter of the circle. Okay, so formulas you're going to need to know. Circumference equals 2 pi r, or you can use pi times d. So 2 times pi times the radius, or pi times diameter. What is 2 radii going to make? It's going to make a diameter. So that's why these 2 things are exactly the same. Area formula for a circle, and I go area and then I draw a little circle, is pi r squared. Boom, those are the 2 formulas we're going to need. Here is my final example I'm going to do with you guys. Find the circumference and area of a circle with radius 8 centimeters. So then it says use the pi key in your calculator. So you're going to need your calculator because I want you to round. I'm going to ask you to do this 2 times. I'm going to ask you to round, and then I'm going to ask you to leave your answer in terms of pi. So I'm going to show you what that means. Oh, and before I answer this, fun fact of the video. There is 1 green heart somewhere in this classroom. Tomorrow, see if you can find it. 1 green heart in this classroom somewhere. Okay, going back to this problem. Circumference, we know circumference is 2 pi r. So I'm going to plug in 8 here, and 2 times 8 is 16 pi. If I asked you to leave your answers in terms of pi, which I like to do, 16 pi is it. I want a pi somewhere in your answer. I like these this type of question better. But in this case, it wants you to round the answer to the nearest tenth. So you literally have to put in 16 times pi. And there's a pi button on your calculator somewhere. If you can't find it, I will show you tomorrow. But when you plug it in, it should be 50.3 centimeters. Circumference is like perimeter, so you just leave it as centimeters. If we're talking about area now, area equals pi r squared. So you plug in the 8 here. 8 squared is 64. So again, if I was asking you to leave it in terms of pi, 64 pi centimeters squared would be your answer. But since I want it in terms of in real numbers, you'd actually punch in 64 pi in your calculator, and it should be 201.1 centimeters squared. So this should have been centimeters for perimeter. Sorry, I know that's a little congested. If you're confused, look in the book and I can help you out tomorrow. 5A and 5B, I want you to try on your own. These are harder questions that I will ask you. This one, I'm asking for diameter. What happens if the diameter is 8 centimeters? And then this one, really try your hard. You're going to have to work backwards. And we're going to talk about this tomorrow. Awesome. You guys rock my socks off.